December 1944. Bastogne is surrounded. The 101st Airborne Division is freezing in foxholes, running out of ammunition, running out of food, running out of hope. German forces have encircled the town completely. Over 18,000 American soldiers are trapped, waiting for relief that military experts say cannot possibly arrive in time. The roads are blocked. The weather is impossible. The nearest American armored force is over 100 miles away, facing the wrong direction, engaged in completely different operations. Then something impossible happens. General George S. Patton's Third Army turns 90 degrees in the middle of winter, marches 100 miles through a blizzard, and smashes through German lines to rescue the trapped defenders. Patton saves thousands of American lives in 48 hours. It becomes one of the most remarkable military maneuvers in history. But 16 months earlier, George Patton was finished. His career was dead. His reputation was destroyed. He was one signature away from being sent home in permanent disgrace until Winston Churchill intervened and told Dwight Eisenhower a truth that no one in America wanted to hear. August 3, 1943, Sicily, the 15th Evacuation Hospital near Nicosia. General George S. Patton walks through the rows of wounded soldiers. He has been visiting hospitals for weeks, shaking hands with injured men, pinning medals on heroes, boosting morale wherever he goes. Patton believes a commander must be seen. He believes soldiers fight harder when they know their general cares about them. On this day, Patton moves from bed to bed, speaking with soldiers who have lost limbs, soldiers who have been shot, soldiers who have faced German tanks and artillery. Then he stops at one bed. Private Charles Kuhl sits on the edge, no visible wounds, no bandages, no blood. Patton asks what is wrong with him. Kuhl looks up with empty eyes and says he cannot take it anymore. The noise, the fear, the constant shelling. He says his nerves are shot. Something inside Patton snaps. He has just come from speaking with men who lost arms and legs, men who were burned, men who were dying. And here sits a soldier with no physical wounds, claiming he cannot fight. Patton explodes. He slaps Kuhl across the face with his glove. He calls him a coward. He grabs him by the collar and shoves him toward the tent entrance. He tells him to get back to the front where men are dying while cowards hide in hospitals. Doctors and nurses stand frozen in shock. No one has ever seen a 3-star general strike a hospitalized soldier. Patton storms out of the hospital still shouting. Behind him, Private Kuhl sits in stunned silence, his face red from the blow. The medical staff immediately begins documenting what happened. They write detailed reports. They record witness statements. They do not know what to do with these reports, but they know what they saw was wrong. The reports are sent up the chain of command. They eventually reach the desk of the Gruber medical officer, who reads them with growing horror and realizes he is holding documents that could end George Patton's career. 1 week later, August 10, 1943, the 93rd Evacuation Hospital. Patton has not learned anything from the first incident. He does not even know reports have been filed. He walks into another hospital tent on another morale visit. Private Paul Bennett sits trembling on a cot. Bennett has been in combat for weeks. He has watched friends die. He has been under constant artillery bombardment. The doctors have diagnosed him with severe combat fatigue, what later generations will call post-traumatic stress disorder. Bennett does not want to be in the hospital. He begged to stay with his unit. But the doctors ordered him to the rear because he could not stop shaking, could not sleep, could not function. When Patton sees Bennett trembling, he sees another coward. He does not see a man whose mind has been broken by the horrors of war. He sees weakness. He slaps Bennett hard across the face. He slaps him again. Bennett does not react, does not defend himself, just sits there, shaking and weeping. Patton draws one of his famous pearl-handled revolvers. Medical staff gasp. For a terrible moment, it seems like Patton might actually use it. Instead, Patton waves the weapon and screams that he ought to shoot cowards like Bennett himself. He threatens to send him to the front lines where Germans will kill him if his own cowardice does not. He strikes Bennett a third time, knocking his helmet liner to the ground. Then Patton storms out, leaving behind a hospital full of witnesses who cannot believe what they just saw. The commanding medical officer immediately writes a detailed report. This report, combined with the report from the first incident 1 week earlier, is sent directly to General Eisenhower's headquarters. When Eisenhower reads the reports, he sits in silence for a long time. He knows exactly what this means. George Patton, his most aggressive commander, his most successful general, has just handed his enemies the ammunition to destroy him completely. Eisenhower faces an impossible decision. On one hand, what Patton did is inexcusable. He struck hospitalized soldiers suffering from combat fatigue. He threatened them with his pistol. He humiliated them in front of medical staff. On the other hand, Patton has just conquered western Sicily faster than anyone thought possible. His 7th Army raced across the island while British forces under Montgomery were still grinding through defenses in the east. Patton reached Messina before Montgomery, a fact that infuriated the British, but proved Patton's extraordinary value as a combat commander. Eisenhower knows the invasion of Europe is coming. He knows he will need every capable commander he has, and he knows that Patton, for all his faults, is irreplaceable in battle. Eisenhower decides to handle the matter quietly. He sends Patton a personal letter demanding he apologize to the soldiers, to the medical staff, to everyone who witnessed the incidents. He orders Patton to address every division in 7th Army and apologize publicly for his behavior. Patton is devastated when he receives Eisenhower's letter. He writes in his diary that he may have ended his own career through stupidity. He visits both soldiers and apologizes personally. Private Cool accepts the apology graciously. Private Bennett is too traumatized to respond. Patton gives speeches to his divisions admitting his mistake. He is genuinely remorseful, though he still does not fully understand why his actions were so wrong. In his mind, he was trying to shake cowards out of their fear. He does not yet understand combat fatigue as a legitimate medical condition. He sees it as weakness of character that strong leadership can fix, but he follows Eisenhower's orders precisely because he knows his career hangs by a thread. For 3 months, the incident remains secret. The reporters covering the Sicily campaign know about it, but Eisenhower personally asks them not to publish the story. The reporters agree to keep the secret for the good of the war effort. For 3 months, the cover-up holds. Then everything falls apart. November 21st, 1943. Washington, D.C. journalist Drew Pearson broadcasts his popular radio program to millions of American listeners across the country. Pearson has obtained detailed information about the slapping incidents. He does not care about military agreements or Eisenhower's requests for secrecy. He has a story that will shock the nation, and he intends to tell it. Pearson describes how General George Patton slapped shell-shocked soldiers in hospital beds, threatened them with his pistol, and called them cowards. He describes how the Army covered it up to protect their famous general. America explodes with outrage. Newspapers across the country run the story on their front pages for days. Members of Congress demand formal investigations. Parents whose sons are fighting overseas are horrified that a general would strike sick soldiers. The Secretary of War receives thousands of letters and telegrams demanding Patton be court-martialed immediately. Eisenhower is blindsided by the broadcast. His quiet handling of the situation has become a national scandal. At Allied headquarters, Eisenhower's staff prepares the paperwork to relieve Patton of command permanently. It seems inevitable now. The political pressure is simply too great to resist. Congress is threatening formal hearings. The American press is relentless in its coverage. Eisenhower summons his closest advisors to discuss what options remain. Most recommend cutting Patton loose immediately before the scandal grows worse. He has become a political liability that threatens the entire command structure. Better to sacrifice one general than to let the controversy consume everything. Eisenhower listens carefully to all the arguments. He understands the political logic completely, but something holds him back from signing the papers. He keeps thinking about the invasion of Europe planned for the following spring. He keeps thinking about who will lead his armored forces against the German Wehrmacht. He keeps thinking about Patton racing across Sicily while other generals moved with painful caution. Then word arrives from London. Winston Churchill wishes to discuss a matter of some importance. The communications between Churchill and Eisenhower during this period remain partially private. No complete official transcript of their discussions about Patton exists in the archives. What historians know comes from memoirs written after the war, personal diaries, and second-hand accounts from staff officers. But the substance of Churchill's message is clear from multiple sources. Churchill acknowledged that Patton was impossible to manage. He admitted freely that Patton was crude, reckless, offensive, and chronically insubordinate. He agreed that what Patton did to those soldiers was wrong and deserved serious punishment. Then Churchill made an argument that changed Eisenhower's thinking completely. He posed a simple question that Eisenhower could not answer. When you invade Fortress Europe next year, who else can do what Patton does? Eisenhower searched for names and found none. Churchill pressed his point further. Punish the man. Humiliate him publicly if politics demands it, but do not lose him. You will desperately need him for the battles ahead. Churchill's words carried enormous weight because he understood Patton in ways that American politicians and newspaper editors simply did not. Churchill had met Patton in January 1943 at the Casablanca Conference in Morocco. They spent hours together talking about military history, about Alexander the Great, about Hannibal, about Napoleon, about the fundamental nature of warfare across the centuries. Churchill recognized something in Patton that he saw in himself when he looked in the mirror. Both men were difficult personalities who made enemies easily. Both were aggressive by nature and impatient with caution. Both were politically inconvenient to their respective establishments. Both had been written off as finished by their critics before proving themselves spectacularly in moments of crisis. Churchill saw Patton not as a liability to be discarded, but as a rare asset that simply could not be replaced by any other man. Churchill understood that great wars are not won by committees or by careful, methodical men. They are won by warriors willing to take risks that careful men consider utterly insane. Eisenhower made his decision. He would not relieve Patton of duty. He would punish him severely and publicly. He would remove him from command of 7th Army immediately. He would keep him in a kind of professional exile with no combat assignment, but he would not send him home to America. He would not end his military career permanently. He would keep Patton available for when he was needed again. The announcement satisfied absolutely no one. Congress remained furious that Patton faced no court-martial for striking enlisted soldiers. The press continued its attacks for weeks. Patton's many enemies within the military establishment saw an opportunity to finish him and were frustrated when it slipped away. But Eisenhower held firm against all pressure. He told his critics simply that Patton's value in future combat operations outweighed the political cost of keeping him on duty. Most people interpreted this as Eisenhower protecting a personal friend. Very few understood that the decision came from cold strategic calculation, strongly reinforced by Winston Churchill's counsel from across the Atlantic. January through May 1944. England. George Patton lives in a state of professional purgatory that slowly destroys his spirit. He has no command. He has no troops under him. He attends official dinners and gives speeches to boost morale among soldiers preparing for invasion. But he is not involved in actual planning for the assault on Europe. He watches other generals receive the important assignments he believes rightfully should be his. Omar Bradley, who served under Patton in Sicily as his subordinate, is given overall command of American ground forces for the invasion. Patton simply cannot believe this insult. He is senior to Bradley in rank and experience. He has more actual combat time against the Germans. He proved himself brilliantly in both North Africa and Sicily. But Bradley gets the top command, while Patton sits idle in England, doing nothing of importance. The humiliation burns constantly. Patton writes in his diary that he would rather be dead than endure such professional shame. He contemplates everything he has lost. What Patton does not know is that Eisenhower has secret plans for him. Operation Fortitude, the most elaborate and successful military deception in the history of warfare. Allied intelligence services have created an enormous fiction designed to convince German high command that the main invasion of Europe will target Pas de Calais, not the beaches of Normandy, where it will actually land. They have constructed entire fake tank battalions made of inflatable rubber. They have built fake airfields with wooden aircraft. They have generated fake radio traffic between fake units. They have created an entire phantom army group that exists only on paper and in German intelligence reports. This massive fake force needs a commander the Germans will believe is real. It needs someone the Germans genuinely fear, someone they are already watching closely, someone whose apparent presence at Calais would absolutely convince them that Calais is the real target. It needs George Patton. Eisenhower assigns Patton to command the entirely fictitious 1st United States Army Group. Patton believes he is being saved for the most important mission of the war. The deception works far more brilliantly than anyone hoped. German intelligence is completely convinced that Patton is the best general the Allies possess. German commanders simply cannot believe that Eisenhower would waste Patton in a secondary role while lesser men lead the main assault. When German spies detect the fake army group concentrated near Dover and Calais, they conclude with certainty that Calais must be the real invasion target. Even after D-Day arrives, when Allied forces actually land on the beaches of Normandy on June 6th, German high command holds back critical armored reserves. They believe firmly that the Normandy landing is merely a feint to draw their attention. They believe the real invasion under Patton will strike Calais any day. They wait anxiously for an attack that never comes. This fatal hesitation costs Germany dearly. By the time they finally realize Normandy is the actual main invasion, Allied forces have established a beachhead that cannot possibly be dislodged. Patton's fearsome reputation has helped win a crucial battle without him firing a single shot. July 1944. George Patton finally arrives in France to take command of the newly activated 3rd United States Army. He has been given his second chance at last, exactly as Churchill predicted he would need. The breakout from the Normandy beachhead has begun after weeks of grinding combat. American forces have finally broken through the stubborn German defensive lines. Now Eisenhower needs someone to exploit that breakthrough aggressively, to race across France before the Germans can possibly establish new defensive positions. He needs the fastest, most aggressive, most relentless commander available anywhere. He needs Patton. From the very moment he assumes command, Patton is completely unleashed. He drives his army forward at a pace that stuns allies and enemies alike. 3rd Army advances 30 miles in a single day, then 40 miles, then 50 miles the next day. They liberate French towns faster than headquarters can update the maps. They capture German prisoners by the tens of thousands. German commanders cannot comprehend how any army can possibly move this fast across such distances. August 1944. 3rd Army races across the fields and roads of France like nothing the world has ever seen. Patton covers 600 miles in less than 1 month of continuous offensive operations. He reaches the border of Germany itself, while other Allied armies are still fighting their way out of Normandy far behind him. His advance is so incredibly fast that his own headquarters staff cannot accurately track his forward positions on any map. Supply lines stretch far beyond the breaking point. Fuel runs desperately short everywhere. Patton's logistics officers beg him constantly to slow down, to wait for supply trucks to catch up, to consolidate his enormous gains before pushing further. Patton absolutely refuses to stop. He tells his men to capture German fuel depots and use enemy gasoline. He tells them to abandon broken vehicles and keep moving forward on foot if necessary. He insists that speed matters more than logistics, that a fast attack with exhausted troops accomplishes more than a slow attack with fresh reserves waiting. The Germans simply cannot defend against him because they cannot predict where he will appear next. December 1944, the Ardennes forest along the Belgian-German border. Germany launches its last desperate major offensive of the entire war. Over 200,000 German soldiers attack through the frozen forest in a surprise assault, smashing through thinly held American lines and creating a massive, dangerous bulge in the Allied front. The 101st Airborne Division, along with other units, becomes completely surrounded at Bastogne, a critical crossroads town in Belgium. If Bastogne falls to the Germans, their armored columns can continue advancing westward toward vital Allied supply ports. If Bastogne somehow holds, the entire German offensive will eventually stall and fail. But the defenders cannot hold forever against overwhelming enemy numbers. They are running out of ammunition, medical supplies, food, and hope. They need relief forces urgently. At an emergency command meeting, Eisenhower asks his assembled generals how quickly they can organize a counterattack to relieve the surrounded garrison. Most generals at the meeting tell Eisenhower they will need at least 2 weeks to reposition their forces for any meaningful counterattack against the German salient. Divisions must be pulled from current operations, reorganized, resupplied, and marched into new positions through terrible winter weather. The logistics are genuinely daunting. Then Patton speaks up calmly. He announces the Third Army can attack northward toward Bastogne in exactly 48 hours. The conference room falls completely silent. Every officer present knows the Third Army is currently facing east, fully engaged, in offensive operations over 100 miles south of Bastogne, turning an entire army of 100,000 men 90 degrees and launching a major attack in 48 hours through snow and ice is considered absolutely impossible by every military manual ever written. Patton says simply that he can do it. Eisenhower looks at his old friend and asks if he is serious. Patton replies that he has never been more serious about anything in his entire life. What the other generals do not know is that Patton has already anticipated exactly this crisis. Days before the emergency meeting, when intelligence first reported unusual German activity in the Ardennes sector, Patton quietly ordered his staff to prepare detailed contingency plans for precisely this situation. He has 3 completely different attack plans ready and waiting in his headquarters safe. He needs only Eisenhower's verbal approval to execute whichever plan fits the situation best. Eisenhower gives the order to proceed. What happens over the next 48 hours becomes permanent military legend. Third Army disengages from its current combat operations, pivots 90 degrees northward, and marches over 100 miles through freezing rain, heavy snow, and treacherous icy mountain roads. On December 26th, forward elements of the 4th Armored Division smash through German lines and reach the battered defenders of Bastogne. The siege is finally broken. Over 18,000 American soldiers are saved from death or capture. It remains the fastest major military repositioning in modern warfare history. History turns on single moments, single decisions, single conversations between powerful men. What if Churchill had remained silent? What if Eisenhower had yielded to political pressure and sent Patton home in disgrace after the slapping scandal? The men freezing in their foxholes at Bastogne would have waited for relief that never came. 18,000 American families would have received very different telegrams that Christmas. Churchill saw clearly what others refused to see. Some warriors are simply too valuable to discard, regardless of how difficult and troublesome they may be. Patton proved Churchill right when it mattered most. What do you think? Did Patton deserve his second chance, or should he have faced full consequences for striking those soldiers? Tell me in the comments below. If this story moved you, share it with someone who appreciates real history.